Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. First up, the editorials and columns, and the first one is Fuel to the Fire. The first editorial is related to the trio of Citizenship Amendment Act, the National Population Register, and the National Register of Citizens (NRC). Citizenship Amendment Act primarily means that illegal migrants from three Islamic countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, if they belong to Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Parsis, and if they have fled these three countries because of religious persecution, they will not be deemed as illegal migrants. Instead, they will be provided with Indian citizenship. That's the whole crux of Citizenship Amendment Act. What is NPR? NPR is a list of all the usual residents of India. Who are these usual residents? Those who are staying at a particular location in India for the past 6 or more months, or those who will be staying at a particular location in India for 6 or more months. That means these are usual residents, and a usual resident can be a citizen as well as a foreigner. That means NPR contains the list and details of all the usual residents in India. NRC is basically an exercise to identify the illegal migrants, and once illegal migrants are identified, the list contains details of only the Indian citizens. That means NRC will have the details of only the Indian citizens. CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act, is now the law of the land. NPR, it was initiated in 2010, was updated in 2015, and now will be updated in 2020 as well. And on this NRC, there is still confusion. We don't know whether it will be implemented or not, and if it will be implemented, what is going to be the time frame. But what is this editorial all about? This editorial talks about the combine of CAA, NPR, and NRC, and says that all these three things should be linked together, should be seen not in isolation, but should be seen in conjunction with each other. How? If NRC is implemented, which primarily means that the entire population residing in India will have to prove whether they are Indian citizens or not. And if you can prove because of your documents that you are Indian citizen, your name will be mentioned in this NRC list. That means you are the citizens of India. And all those who are not in a position to prove through documentation that they are the citizens of India, that means primarily they are illegal migrants in India. And these illegal migrants will not be mentioned in NRC. That means they are not the citizens of India. But all those illegal migrants who have come from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and who belong to either Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, and Parsis, they will not be deemed as illegal migrants. They will be provided citizenship. That means their names will be mentioned in the NRC. This is where the critics argue that the entire purpose of CAA and the NRC is to exclude the Muslims. That is why it has generated a lot of controversy in this country, and that is why some people argue that this is unconstitutional and violates the right to equality under Article 14 of the Constitution of India. If you look at today's Indian Express, constitutional expert Subhash Kashyap had said that there was no need to mention the names of the religions in CAA. You could have only mentioned that all those who have fled Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh because of religious persecution, they will not be deemed as illegal migrants. That means they will be provided Indian citizenship. So even without mentioning the names of these religious communities, you could have realized the objective. That means there was no need, no urgency to mention the names of these religions. Even without mentioning the names of these religions, you could have realized your objective. That is why critics argue that since you are excluding Muslims, you are sending out a signal that Muslims will be the second-rate citizens in this country. Then what about NPR? Since NRC has generated a lot of controversy, Prime Minister Modi, in his address at an election rally at Ramlila Maidan in Delhi, said that this word NRC has not been discussed by my government. Now the critics argue that through NPR they want to implement NRC. What is NPR? NPR basically is the list of all those who are the usual residents in this country. But the NPR exercise, when it was conducted in 2010 and 2015, it was different from the NPR exercise that will be conducted in 2020, because now additional details will be sought. Which are these details? Place of birth of father and mother. When through this NPR exercise, you are seeking the details of where your parents were born, that means basically you are trying to identify the citizenship. You are basically trying to identify who are the citizens and who are the illegal migrants. That is why some people argue that NPR is the first exercise towards a nationwide implementation of NRC. That means the data that the government will get through NPR exercise, that will be used in the NRC exercise. Although the government has denied any link, but this editorial says that in all likelihood, the three combined of CAA, NPR and NRC will pay political dividends to the BJP, but it will be at a very high cost to the nation. This is the time to douse the fire, not add fuel to it. One interesting thing in this editorial is the burden of proof must not be on the people to prove their citizenship. What does that mean? When NRC exercise was carried out in Assam under the aegis of the Supreme Court of India, there the people had to prove whether they are Indian citizens or not. How can people prove? Through documents. But this is particularly difficult for people who come from marginalized communities. They may not have documents. They may have lost the documents because of fire, because of some other natural disasters. And it is particularly difficult for uneducated, illiterate people to prove through documents that they are Indian citizens. But NRC exercise, when it was conducted in Assam, people had to prove through documents that they are Indian citizens. This editorial argues that the burden should not be on the people to prove their citizenship. The burden should be on Indian state. Indian state, if they say that these individuals are not Indian citizens, the state should prove through documents that they are not Indian citizens. Since it is very difficult for people to prove through documentation that they are Indian citizens, the burden should shift from citizens proving that they are citizens to state proving that these individuals are not citizens. That is the entire crux of this editorial, fuel to the fire. Now let's look at another column written by AP Shah. AP Shah is the former Chief Justice of Delhi High Court as well as former chairperson of the Law Commission of India. But before we discuss this, let me tell you something interesting. Let's say you are a believer of an ideology X, or you are in favor of X, but there is an individual who is believer of an ideology Y or who believes in Y. You should listen to the arguments of this individual. Not because this individual can convert you into his ideology, no. But if you are wrong, you can correct yourself. And if you are proven right, that means your faith in your ideology will further strengthen. That is why it is always very important to listen to contrarian views. It is always important to have a critical understanding of the issues. That's what Voltaire also said. Voltaire said, I disagree with what you say, but I will defend till death your right to say it. Disagreement is health. Dissent is health in a democracy. We should always debate different points of views. This is critical to the Citizenship Amendment Act passed by the Parliament recently. AP Shah says that this entire law is immoral. This is where I will draw your attention to a column written in today's Indian Express by Kapil Sibal. Kapil Sibal says, even if Citizenship Amendment Act passes the test of judicial scrutiny, that means even if CAA is declared constitutional by the courts, that means it is a good law. Even then, a good law can also be an immoral law. How? He cites the example of Section 377 of Indian Penal Code, which was decriminalized by the Supreme Court last year. Section 377 criminalized homosexuality. despite the fact that it was law of the land. But even if it was law of the land, it was immoral, and that is why it was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So Kapil Sibal argues that even if a law passes the test of the judicial scrutiny, but even this law can also be immoral. A law can be constitutional, a law can be legal, but at the same time it can be immoral as well. And AP Shah says Citizenship Amendment Act violates Article 14 of the Constitution of India. How? Article 14 talks about equality before law. And Article 14 also includes the right against arbitrariness. That means if the Citizenship Amendment Act picks only three countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, why is it that Sri Lanka is excluded? Myanmar is excluded? Nepal is excluded? That means the way you have chosen these three countries is arbitrary. That is why it violates Article 14 of the Constitution of India. And why the names of the religions are mentioned in the Citizenship Amendment Act and deliberately you are excluding Muslims without any rational basis. That is why it is arbitrary, and that is why it violates Article 14 of the Constitution of India. But the crux of this article lies somewhere else. It talks about the role of the judiciary. The whole point of Justice AP Shah is that whenever there is a strong government at the center, which means whenever there is a party in power at the center which has the absolute majority, the judiciary is not in a position to stand up to this government. This was best reflected during the time of the emergency in 1975-77. Hundreds of political activists, students, lawyers, trade union leaders were arrested by the Indira Gandhi government. And when these individuals approached the Supreme Court that our Article 21 is getting violated, they filed a petition of habeas corpus. Supreme Court said during emergency, even habeas corpus is suspended. The most infamous case, ADM Jabalpur versus State of Madhya Pradesh. 5 judges of the Constitution bench had to decide whether during emergency habeas corpus is suspended or not. 4 judges said habeas corpus is suspended during the time of emergency. Only 1 judge dissented, Justice Khanna. The 4 judges said, even if these political activists, lawyers, politicians, students, trade union leaders, even if they are arrested, but the care given by the state in jails is maternal. Just like a mother cares for her children, in the same manner, these detainees are cared for by the state. When there were protests against CAA at Jamia Millia Islamia, Aligarh Muslim University and other places in Delhi, a petition was filed before the Supreme Court that there should be a judicial probe into the police excesses because the police has used disproportionate force against the students. The Chief Justice of India said that if people protest and they take to streets, then they need not approach the courts. Justice AP Shah is critical of the Chief Justice of India. He says when CAA is immoral, then people's movement is inevitable and necessary. And the whole crux of this article is mentioned in the last paragraph. Historically, Indian courts had a checkered history in tackling circumstances where they are the final arbiter, especially when faced with the powerful executive. Emergency is the case in point. This is a watershed movement for this generation of judges to undo the wrongs of the past and not succumb to the powerful executive at the center. That is the crux of this article written by AP Shah. Let's look at another column written by Professor Arun Kumar. It talks about economic stagnation. For growth to happen, investments are required. Investment, without investment, there can be no growth. But where is this investment going to come from? Either from government or private sector. Professor Arun Kumar argues that private sector is investing less right now. Why? Because of economic slowdown, the private sector has lost the confidence, and that is why it is investing less. That means the government will have to invest more so that there is growth in the economy. But which government? Central government or state government? Both. But where does the government get the money so that it can invest this money so that the growth is improved? This investment primarily comes through the tax revenue, Let's say, for example, we have something called divisible pool of tax, income tax, corporate tax. All the proceeds from these taxes are to be shared with the states. According to 14th Finance Commission, 42% of the divisible pool of taxes is to be shared with the state government. But this is where the state governments are at a disadvantage according to Professor Arun Kumar. There is going to be a shortfall of around 2 lakh crores. That means 2 lakh crore less tax revenue is going to be accrued by the central government. Why? Because corporate tax has been cut. It has been cut to 22%. That means when corporate tax has been cut, it has led to 1.45 lakh crores less revenue to the government, which means that the total revenue that is to be shared with the states will be less. That means the states will get 58,000 crore less in revenue. So where is the money going to come from if the government will have to invest more so that the growth rate is increased? That's one problem. Second important thing is there is central GST, there is state GST, there is integrated GST. This integrated GST is to be shared with the states by the center, and the center right now is reluctant to share the amount of money. Why? Because the center says that we have the revenue shortfall, we have the deficit revenue, we will not be in a position to share much. That is why there are states which are demanding their due share from the central government. On top of that, when GST was to be implemented in this country, states were apprehensive that they will lose their revenue. Then a compromise was reached. It was argued that if the states are generating revenue which is less than 14%, then the central government will compensate these states if they have lost revenue because of the implementation of the GST. Even this money is owed by the central government to the states. Now, how do we resolve this problem? According to Professor Arun Kumar, the focus of this article is how not to counter economic stagnation. How not to counter? Because some experts said GST rates should be increased. If the GST rates are increased, more revenue to the center, more revenue to the state, more investment, more growth. But Arun Kumar says this should not happen. Why? Because if GST rates are increased, it will lead to further fall in the demand of the goods because people don't have money in their hands. If GST rates are increased, that means the demand will be further less and GDP will further reduce. That's one way not to counter economic stagnation. The other argument presented is that let's have reduction in income tax. But Professor Arun Kumar says even this should not happen because according to Professor Arun Kumar, only 2% citizens pay income tax. If we have to focus on the unorganized sector. The government will have to invest more in the unorganized sector because the rural demand is falling in this country. And how to tackle rural demand? For that something, Maganrega wages should be increased. So that when people have more money in rural India, they will be in a position to demand more goods. When the demand for goods increases, that means the manufacturers will start manufacturing more and ultimately GDP will also increase, GDP will also grow. That is the crux of this article written by Professor Arun Kumar. Now let's look at another editorial, Decisive Shift. A couple of days ago, we discussed the decision of the Union Cabinet which approved the post of CDS, Chief of Defence Staff. The then Defence Minister Manohar Parrikar had promised to create the post of a CDS. And this year, on August 15, in his Independence Day address, the Prime Minister had stressed the importance of creating the post of CDS. This editorial talks about the significance of the post and the challenges ahead. But first up, let me briefly summarize what we discussed a couple of days ago for the benefit of our new subscribers. After the Kargil War of 1999, the Government of India set up a Kargil Review Committee. Kargil Review Committee recommended some reforms, structural reforms at the top level of the defense forces. And when this report was submitted, it was reviewed by a group of ministers. This group of ministers recommended the creation of Chief of Defence Staff post. But why? What is the significance of CDS? We have different commands. For example, Indian Army, it has 7 commands: Northern, Southern, Eastern, Western, Central, then we have Army Training Command, then we have Southwestern Command. There are 7 commands. Similarly, Indian Navy has 3 commands: Western, Eastern, Southern. Indian Air Force, it has 7 commands. Coast Guard has 5 commands. But if you look at all of these, they work independently. There is no jointness. And when there is no jointness, that means there is no efficiency as well. The idea is to create theater commands. Theater commands such as China. In 2016, China officially inaugurated 5 theater commands. What do we mean by theater commands? Let's say, for example, this is the Southern Command. Here we have Indian Army, Indian Navy, we may have Coast Guard as well, Indian Air Force. Why can't there be jointness so that all of them will come under one command? Because today they act independently. There is no jointness. The idea is to create theater commands so that there is more jointness and togetherness in the working of the defense forces. But this couldn't happen in India because of 2 reasons. Reason number 1, inter-services rivalry. And what is this inter-services rivalry? The size of Indian Army is much larger than Indian Navy and Indian Air Force. So if the CDS is going to come from Army, Indian Navy and Air Force felt that they would be dominated by the men in the armed forces. That is why, because of this inter-services rivalry, there could be no decision on CDS. Also because of bureaucracy. Our bureaucracy is resistant to change. And they don't want to give up their authority, their influence. Because if CDS is to be implemented, then the influence of the Secretary of the Ministry of Defense would reduce. And ultimately what will happen? The bureaucracy will be sidelined. That is why, because of these principal reasons, we could not implement CDS. But now this editorial praises the decision of the government, says it is a decisive shift because now Chief of Defense Staff will be appointed. He will also head the Department of Military Affairs. His position will be that of a 4-star general. He will also act as the secretary of this newly created Department of Military Affairs. But now there are challenges as well. To create these theater commands, it requires time. That is why this editorial says that whoever is appointed as the first Chief of Defense Staff, his tenure should be 3 years. So that 3 years normally it would take for these theater commands to be set up, so that this first CDS is not interrupted and he will implement this theater command. That is why the first incumbent to the post of CDS must be in a position to complete this task. The job is strategic, it requires personal supervision and cannot be left unfinished for the successor to finish. That is why it is necessary that for the first incumbent be given a term of 3 years so as to be able to carry the ambitious vision. That is what you need to understand from this editorial. Now let's look at few facts related to prelims. Compulsory renewal of OCI cards goes. OCI is the closest to dual citizenship in India. India does not value dual citizenship, but the closest that India reaches to dual citizenship is OCI card. A foreigner who has Indian links, who ever held an Indian passport but now is a foreigner, he is eligible to apply for Overseas Citizen of India Cardholder scheme. And if you have an OCI card, you can enter India without visa for life. And whenever you enter India, you don't have to register with the FRRO. But what is this newspaper article all about? This OCI card is linked to the passport of a foreigner. But what if this passport expires? A new passport is given, a new passport number is generated. Then, if you are less than 20 years or more than 50 years, you had to renew your OCI card as well. That means each time an individual is getting a renewed passport, but this individual is less than 20 years of age, he had to renew his OCI as well. And if the individual is above 50 years, he had to renew the OCI as well. And now this compulsory renewal of OCI card goes. There is no need for certain age group to do so on renewal of their passports. Beyond these editorials and this newspaper article, there is nothing relevant for your exam. Let's now jump to the practice questions. First up, prelims based questions. Which of the following statements is or are correct? President of India may provide for the adjudication of any dispute or complaint with respect to interstate river water disputes. This statement is incorrect because it is not the president, it is the parliament under Article 262 of the Indian Constitution. Statement number 2, Parliament may by law provide that neither the Supreme Court nor any other court shall exercise jurisdiction in respect of any such dispute or complaint regarding interstate rivers. This statement is correct. So which of the following statements are correct? Only two. What is the context? The context is this newspaper article in today's The Hindu newspaper, because on this Mahadayi river there is a dispute between Goa and Karnataka. Let's look at another question. Which of the following agency regulates drones in India? Ministry of Civil Aviation. Consider the following pairs. There is spacecraft and the planet. Cassini-Huygens deals with Saturn, yes. InSights deals with Mars, yes. Juno with Jupiter, yes. Which of the above pairs are correctly matched? All of them. Let's look at the fourth question. With reference to Kudiyatam, consider the following statements. It is a traditional performing art form in the state of Tamil Nadu. No, it is related to the state of Kerala. It is officially recognized by UNESCO as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. This statement is correct. Which of the above statements are correct? Only two. Let's look at Prelims 2019 question. What is common to the places known as Aliyar, Isapur and Kangsabati? These are water reservoirs. Let's look at mains based questions. There are two questions. You'll have to write answers in less than 250 words. Post Brexit, India can use Ireland as window to European Union. Comment. Second, low wages and income inequality have led to a fall in demand. This situation cannot give rise to sustainable economic growth. Discuss. That is it from our newspaper analysis for today. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.